Hello, welcome back to week number 2 of our Interurban Art House series. And if you're watching this video, hopefully you participated already in the first week of making a triptych on past, present, and future. So today we are going to jump back in. I'll reintroduce myself again. I'm Sherry Jacobs, and we're so happy to have you here in this format. Today, we are going to use a journal. You probably received a journal. It might be a different color than this in your kit. Some people received a hardback one. I got as many as I could in the store, but everybody else received these little paperback ones, a little bit less threatening than a hardback one for some reason. And today we're going to talk about the topic of resilience. So I'm going to talk a little bit, work a little bit, talk a little bit more, and then show you my final product. Feel free to fast forward if you don't want to hear all of my tales and stories about the topic of resilience. But I think it might be helpful as we're working to maybe just fill in the edges and expand that topic of resilience. I think when people hear it sometimes these days, they cringe a little bit and they're like, resilience, don't shove that down my throat any more than it has already been shoved down my throat. So my apologies if you read anything about resilience and it frustrated you. My hope today is that we get to sort of look at it with fresh eyes and a fresh perspective. And the beauty of art therapy and how art therapists think is we really use visual art as a tool to help us think and express ourselves differently in real time. And then oftentimes what we find is when people walk away from engaging in sort of intentional art like we're making, they get to have a relic of what they were thinking about at that moment. So that's our hope. And what we're doing with this journal today, because a blank journal can be quite threatening, is we are setting up our journal to create a gratitude journal. Again, you might be rolling your eyes going, oh no, I've seen those in nice, cute gift shops. I've received those as gifts. And oftentimes, many people will say that their blank journals remain blank. So we're gonna give ourselves a leg up on this and start to sort of create it to help us get our gratitude journal set up. My invitation for you is to keep a 30-day gratitude journal. And there's quite a bit of research behind this. So here's what you might need today for your materials. Your journal. I pulled out the bag. There was a bag of some scrapbooky material. Everyone got lots of random things in there. I also am bringing scissors, my glue stick, just some pens, and I found this nifty ruler that I'm going to use that has like a stencil thing on it. And I brought markers as well. So first, let me start by just defining resilience. This is the dictionary version of resilience. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. 2, the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. So I'm recording this, it is mid-February of 2022. And what I'm observing in my client population is this is kind of a rough time for people. We're almost at the 2-year mark of our pandemic, and it's winter. If you're watching this in a cold place, it's cold. There's still a lot of uncertainty, and I think we're really all sort of being tested at our capacity to just function and deal in these times. So I'm actually going to have you start on your very first page, if you're open to doing this. You can grab a marker or a pen. I'm going to have you draw just like an outline of a torso, okay? Something sort of like that. Not very perfect, but you can tell there's a head and a body, shoulders. I'm really interested in doing this. I use this a lot. And so that's gonna be just the first page of our journal. And perhaps the theme of this image is we get to separate our world into thinking about things we can control, things we can't control. And I think if the pandemic taught us anything, it's really that there's a lot of things that are very out of our control. So then we're left with just us, and what do we have control over? And that's sort of been a big sort of hypothetical, real world thing of what to do about this conundrum. So you can decorate this. Maybe you'll go back and add more things into this. Maybe you'll put some words in there, some colors. But maybe this gets to be a jumping off point. And my idea is that we are going to establish at least 31 pages in here so that every day, perhaps you will write maybe at least 3 things that you can kind of express gratitude for. And maybe we'll decorate each page. Maybe if it's just with a number, I'm gonna work while we're talking. And so, yeah, that's our plan. Sounds interesting, right? I'm gonna actually use my little handy dandy template here to write. I'm gonna use the numbers to write like my numbers 1 through 31 on my pages to start with. But where did this resilience stuff come from these days? Where did this gratitude journal stuff come from that popped up into sort of pop culture? I'm gonna introduce a few ideas. I'm looking over at my computer just so I can think of my notes. In the field of mental health, really the whole history of our field has often just focused on people's deficits, on pathologizing people, on diagnosing people. Mental health practitioners carry a giant, we call it our Bible, the DSM-5, that has all the diagnoses. And the older model of therapy was sitting before the people that we work with and sort of calculating in our head what their diagnosis might be. A newer field has emerged within the mental health field over the past 30 years called positive psychology. It's fascinating. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, one of the people who developed it, Martin Seligman from University of Pennsylvania, initially had become known for his work in learned helplessness. And I think he probably personally just got so frustrated in watching that in his lab and his work and his writings that he chose another avenue. Another famous person that sort of helped shape the field of positive psychology was a gentleman by the name of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi from University of Chicago. You might be familiar with the term flow. He really brought that concept into the world. And so therapists who engage in positive psychology really work on people's strengths. And I will use the word happiness, which is sometimes a dangerous word because people are like, happy, what? No. But that is really the goal in positive psychology is finding those inner strengths. And another person I would like to introduce and another angle of looking at this is there's another style of therapy that came way before the work of Martin Seligman and positive psychology. And that is by a psychiatrist from Vienna named Viktor Frankl, most well known for a book he wrote called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychiatrist in pre-World War II in Vienna. Sadly, he was sent to a concentration camp during World War II. And so he walked through that experience and thankfully survived and developed a whole field of thought called logotherapy, where he came to the conclusion that when we lose everything, the one thing we have left in terms of free will is what we can control is our attitude or our inner kind of view of the world. Another kind of contemporary writer right now and thinker along those lines is a woman named Eva Eger. She is like in her 90s and still practicing in San Diego. She's one of the foremost experts on PTSD in the military. And like Viktor Frankl, she was survived the Holocaust. And also her work was shaped around her experiences as a teenager. And her style of therapy, she coined the term choice therapy, meaning in every situation, we have a choice of how to respond to it, meaning, I'm gonna go back to my little handy dandy torso. When we can't control the outside world, we can control how we perceive it or how we think about it or how we choose to be in it. And so those are a couple ideas. Now we're gonna zip ahead to super pop culture. Ready? Here we go. One of the best-selling books these days is an author by the name of James Clear. He is a motivational speaker, goes to corporate kind of things, but he has some fascinating ideas. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And so his whole profession and story is all about change. And his theory is that, gosh, so many times when we set a goal for ourselves or when we set about trying to change, we often fail and then feel worse about ourselves. I think we often read a lot of these self-help books or have these blank journals, gratitude journals lying around, and we don't fill them out, and then we feel guilty and shame-filled that we aren't doing them, and then we end up feeling worse about ourselves. But he came up with an idea that's great, which I'll pass along here because it kind of matches into what we're talking about. And his idea was, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we sink to the level of our systems. And so he said, when people are working towards change, it's best to set a goal and then explore where the patterning or the negative patterning in our systems are. And we go about changing it in micro steps, thus the name Atomic Habits. And his thinking is, if we can change 1% for whatever habits we're trying to shift, then that 1% is easier to attain than setting a giant goal and getting disappointed when we don't get there. So, with all of those ideas in mind from different fields of thought right now, over the 20th century into the 21st century, now I would like to invite you to creating a gratitude journal with the intention that we're setting up each page so that when we open it up, we're like, oh, I already sat through that creative or therapy session and created my journal with the intention that now I kind of have each page set up so it's a little bit easier, rather than opening up a blank page, to create my gratitude journal. A gratitude journal can be simply writing down 3 things that you observe in the world around you that you might not have paid attention to or thought about. So here's my first page, super simple, not really creative or artistic. I wrote day 1. This will be my first day. So I'm gonna write 3 things that I'm grateful for. I used to work in a nursing home for several years, and I liked doing this exercise with residents. And the number one thing that most people usually said when they came to my group and we talked about gratitude was waking up and being alive. And so I'm gonna write that as my first one. I'm grateful for that, but I'm gonna borrow that from the people who were kind of in their 90s and over 100 that were very, very, very happy just to be alive. Okay? The second thing I'm gonna write is I'm looking out the window in my house and it's sunny. So I'm gonna write a sunny day because I might be in a bad mood or the world might feel cold and like overwhelming, but at least today it's sunny and I'm going to appreciate that because it's been cloudy for many days. And then my third thing I'm gonna put is my community. So those are my 3 things for the day. I might add some more images to that. I might cut up some of my pieces in here. And sometimes this is hard to do alone. And you might want an accountability partner. So maybe you can enlist somebody to create this for you. Everyone has these little tiny envelopes in their bags. They're pretty cute. I'm gonna stretch you a little bit and offer another option. You might, instead of deciding to do a gratitude journal, do a thank you note journal and write a thank you note every day for 31 days. Again, you might be rolling your eyes going, a thank you note, but that might be an interesting little exercise. It might be thank you notes you really write in real life to somebody, or it might be thank you notes of just expressing gratitude to people who have helped you along the way, inspirational people. So that's our game plan. And really these sessions are designed to play upon each other. So last week we explored past, present, future. Today we're really honing in on present, near future, because if we dip around to just staying in past, that can sometimes perpetuate that negativity. When we sit in the present and name what it is, if it isn't so great, then we get to decide what to do with it. Again, going back to the here and now and our torso. So you might even add some words of kind of what you can put the date or the time if this isn't such a good time. If you're experiencing grief, sadness, anger, frustration, confusion, boredom, maybe those are big outer things that the world has presented you. And when you can name those, then your torso and your core self gets to decide sort of what strengths you have to navigate through that. You might take some of these other pages, because there's more than 31 pages, and even make some lists in here, almost as reminders of your strengths you have, or your core self, or things that you enjoy doing, or just a list of like positive activities that you like to do, self-soothing activities you like to do. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but really what we learned from the research from Martin Seligman is that gratitude journals actually have been shown to alleviate depression, which sounds ridiculous that this little simple act could be that powerful, but I'm happy to share the research. I'll send a little link along with some of the research to prove it, that it has some weight behind it in the terms of scientific evidence that it is a positive thing. So have an excellent day. Have a great week. We will come back again next week and talk about the topic of perception. Thank you. Have a good day.